Hello YouTube, I hope you're having a great day today. Today I want to take a look at the next book in Michael Moorcock's Hawkmoon series, The Mad God's Amulet. It was initially published as Sorcerer's Amulet in '68, although pretty quickly afterwards he chose the Mad God's Amulet for its title in the US and some other places too. And the Mad God's Amulet is how it's basically known today in any of his later republications and so forth. So we're going to be taking a look at that. Now we've already looked at the first book in this series a few weeks ago. And that book was basically, it's called the Jewel in the Skull, and it sets you up with the two main groups of people in the story. And the first of those is Hawkmoon and his main adventuring partner, Oladahn, who he meets up with in the second half of the first book. And then you also, the main place of Castle Brass and the Colne, and Count Brass, who runs it, his daughter, Yasilda, his advisor, Bogentle, and so forth. And you'll be introduced. Now, the setting of this world is post-apocalyptic fantasy. It's probably one of the strongest post-apocalyptic fantasy works out there. Now, when I say that, what I mean is that it has a sort of science meets fantasy feel to it. Many of the things that happen are definitely not traditionally things that would happen in a science fiction storyline or be possible. So it's more fantasy powers, but it's told through a scientific sort of lens. And so it has sort of a science fantasy blend to it. This series, by the way, is very, very influential. In fact, Gary Gygax not only cites Michael Moorcock as one of the most important influences on his adventuring, Dungeons & Dragons, and so forth, and his world building. And in fact, that's where he got like the law versus chaos concepts and so forth. Not only does he cite Michael Moorcock generally, but he also cites the Hawkmoon series specifically. And he actually roll calls this specific series. Now I'm taking you a look at this as the first 4 books that we're going to be taking a look at. And the first series, sort of set in the Eternal Champion world building, because I think it's actually probably one of the easiest ones to pick up and read the first time. I think it's probably Moorcock at his easiest, I think, to read and so forth. Moorcock himself would describe himself, and so I'm sure he's fine with me calling him that too, as a bad writer with good ideas. And he said he'd rather be a bad writer with good ideas than a good writer with bad ideas, and so forth. He's never claimed to be this wildly talented person, but he is definitely somebody who's created a lot of different concepts and has been hugely influential. For example, in modern fantasy alone, everything from his concepts of chaos, the 8-pointed star, the multiverse, the word multiverse, these various things. One central champion who's fighting on all the planes for the balance against the powers of law versus chaos, and so forth. Chaos warriors, chaos masters, and so forth. All the basic core concepts of law versus chaos that you find in everything from Games Workshop and Warhammer 40K. Through Dungeons & Dragons and so forth. Michael Moorcock is hugely influential. And this series is another example of how influential he's been. And so forth. In fact, I even named Michael Moorcock as my #1 top influence when I'm talking about my own top 10 influences, my own Appendix N, sort of in homage to Gary Gygax, and as well, I also call him one of the 4 pillars of modern fantasy. So I think Hawkmoon is incredibly strong way to get started with Moorcock, who's incredibly influential. So let's take a look. Okay, Hawkmoon. Now again, we're now the second book into this series. The first book is kind of set with these super bad guys in Great Britain, in a nation, and many of the names of the places and so forth are named after sort of decaying or concepts like the name place has been around for centuries and centuries, and now it's become a more decayed version of itself. In this case, we're going to be looking at Granbreton, which is in Great Britain, and so forth, and the capital of it's Londra, which is obviously London, and so forth. And our hero is going to be one of the Dukes of Colne, who's one of the early resistors against the evil, nasty empire of Granbreton. Now, Granbreton is going to be attacking many of the places. It's going to, and in the first book, it's going to launch attacks against the Camargue and Count Brass after Count Brass has decided not to join by peace treaties and so forth, and has then taken in Hawkmoon, who has a jewel put in his skull, so he'll be controlled by the Empire, but he's able to get it removed. He's able to have the magic turned off and so forth. And so he's on a quest for that, and then And then near the end of the end of the first book, he's out adventuring and so forth. He runs into this guy Oladahn, who's going to become his primary adventuring companion. But we're going to pick up here in the second book, Mad God's Amulet. We're going to pick up right where we left off in the first book. Now, I'm not going to take you. Normally, I might take you maybe half a way through a book, at least in general concepts. I won't do that with you today. In fact, I'm only going to leave you for the first few chapters. And I'm actually going to continue this theme for the rest of this series because Michael Moorcock has mastered the art of telling a big story quickly. I mean, for example, when he's telling the death of a character, he may only use a paragraph or two to do so, and then he moves on to the rest of the story. He may tell an entire battle or in just one chapter, and sometimes not even that, maybe just 3 or 4 pages, and so forth. It's kind of like the summation of the Battle of the Five Armies at the end of The Hobbit, where Bilbo Baggins has been knocked out and they just give him a quick outline as to what happened. It's the same thing. You feel like he got knocked out and so forth, and Moorcock's just kind of telling you what happened. Which I appreciate because he has these giant epic plot lines, and the Mad God's Amulet is a perfect example. You're going to start deep into this quest out in like Ukraine and so forth, and you're going to wind up with so many different things happening. People that have turned traitors, people have joined your team. You're going to wind up being captured, being freed, a siege, and then ultimately at the end of the storyline, the castle's going to disappear and so forth. There's going to be so many things that happen in this one like 150 pages. You're going to be like, how does this guy fit all this stuff into this little tiny piece of text? And that was basically, I mean, it's like he was a journalist. You know how journalists had to write these tiny little articles because the print mattered and so forth. And so you had to learn the art of writing very concisely. And Moorcock has mastered that art from a very early age. He's not going to take 200 pages to say something in 100 pages. He's not going to take 150 pages if he can say it in 75. He's not going to take 50 pages if he can say it in 5. That's just not who he is. He's gonna be very concise with what happens. And as a result, you read one book, and you're like, oh my gosh, a lot of stuff happened in that book. You go read a Robert Jordan novel, it's 3 times the size and nothing happens in it. You might have the same amount of plot that happens in an entire Robert Jordan novel take place in like half a chapter of a Moorcock novel. I mean, it's just night and day. Moorcock has mastered the art of telling a story and moving you on with the rest of your day and your life. And he's done it so in a very, very, very compelling way. So props to Moorcock for that. You could read this stuff very quickly as a result. And in fact, this whole book here, which is probably the size of like a single Robert Jordan novel, at 485 pages long, and it's giant size print, has all 4 of these novels, which means all 4 of the novels in this series are about 120 pages each in this big giant book. It will not take you long to read it. My first time reading these when I was a teenager was probably took me one day each to read them, and I really enjoyed them and so forth. So again, the Mad God's Amulet, very quickly, you're going to be adventuring out there. After he meets up with Oladahn at the end of the previous book, and then so forth, he's going to very quickly realize and push back against this idea that he serves this thing called the Rune Staff, and this guy called Warrior in Jet and Gold is going to be helping him out and trying to get some things. In the first book, he's going to be out there in the city where all the people in this city have become ghost-like and have pushed themselves basically into another dimension, and they're about to be attacked. Well, kind of in half dimension and half not. And they're about to be attacked, and their city's about to be burnt down by Granbreton, led by Davik. And so, as a result, Hawkmoon and his companion are going to be basically given a quest to go find the machine that will send the city over to another dimension fully, so it'll be fully protected and removed from this world, and its people with it, and it will leave the machine behind. So basically what's going to wind up happening is that, in the first, 30, 40 pages, they're going to do that quest, finish the quest, beat the Granbretons, and then the rest of the story is going to take place. There's going to be a Mad God Sorcerer. He's going to have an amulet. He's going to be given the quest by the Warrior Jet Black to take care of that, who's going to join them on their journey. Davik, they're going to rescue Davik. Davik's going to join the team. Lots of things are going to happen, and so forth. But again, I don't want to spend too much time with that, especially since as soon as I hit the end of this record button, I'm actually going to go ahead and record books 3, and then we'll do the same thing for book 4, because I just want to kind of get it out there. We'll probably do this series more quickly than I've done some of my previous series, because it's such a quick read, and because I think it's such a strong story. I think you can get through it pretty quickly, so I'm not going to spend like a month between chapters like I did with, the Chronicles of Amber, which is also a quicker read. And so forth. So we'll probably do this a little bit more quickly than I do with the other ones and so forth. But again, that's the second book, The Mad God's Amulet, originally published as Sorcerer's Amulet by Michael Moorcock, the second book in the Hawkmoon series. So what did you think about it? Did you like it? Have you read it? Have you read the series? I'd love to talk about you with it more. Again, I'm just giving you sort of a sweet little glimpse into it, and then we're going to move on and so forth, because I don't want you to spoil it too much, because so much stuff happens in this book. So I'm only basically giving you the first few chapters and so forth. I'm happy to engage you with it about it further. Did you agree with me or not? Did you agree with Gygax? Do you think this is probably one of his best works? Or with me about how easy he is to pick up? This one is to pick up and read, as opposed to like an Elric book or something like that, which I think is a much more difficult read. Or any of my thoughts on Moorcock, I'm happy to engage you with those further. Just leave me your comments below. If you watch this video, hey, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. We all have busy days and busy lives. So the fact that you spent some of that with me is very, very humbling. And if you enjoyed this video, hey, thank you so much. You might as well hit that subscribe button, right? Because there's going to be so many more reviews and to come. I like to unpack a lot of these classics of fantasy, science fiction, and horror. And Michael Moorcock's big in 2 of those 3, and very influential in 2 of those 3. But in particular, he's a master of fantasy, and we all better acknowledge it, because we're living in Moorcock's world. And then again, thanks for your time and have a good one.